You're watching On the Record here on CNN Philippines. I'm Pia Ontiveros. Summer just around the corner. It is also at this time when Filipinos consume more electricity for cooling, putting pressure on backup power and consequently pushing power rates up. Are our power plants ready for the spike in demand? How do we make sure there is enough supply for everyone for the warm months ahead? This is On the Record. Joining us tonight, House Minority Leader Danilo Suarez, Josefina Magpale Asirit of the Energy Regulatory Commission or ERC, and Bantay Consumer, Kuryente, Calzada Convener Louis Montemar. You're on the record. Thank you very much for joining us, Congressman Suarez, Ma'am Asirit, and Louis Montemar. Thank you for being here. Well, let's begin with this. Every time we talk about energy and power, everybody remembers the nightmare of the very early 1990s. The very literally dark days. I can still remember it very clearly. Blackouts, brownouts, hindi ba?
Yes.
Parang na-traumatize ang Pilipino doon. And then it got to the point na kailangan may power barges tayo, ganun. Nobody wants another situation like that. First of all, are we anywhere near a situation like that?
I think we have an ample reserve of about 10 to 15%, comfortably right now.
And we got this
is
ample...
about 25,
Okay.
Meaning if our peak is about 11,000 siguro tayo.
In Metro in Luzon, peak is about 10,000.
Peak of what?
Peak demand.
Peak demand.
Like if everybody
10,000 what?
10,000 megawatts.
10,000 megawatts.
Okay.
So, ideally, dapat meron kang 25% reserve. Tayo siguro naglalaro kayo ng mga 10 to 15%.
Okay, and that is a comfortable... How did we get to that comfortable position? What happened between the early 1990s until now that allowed us to get here?
If I will just go back to history, why did we have that scenario of really what we call the dark days? The reason is we didn't operate the nuclear plant. And that's 600...
1,000, sir.
No, the nuclear.
Bataan Nuclear Power Plant.
BNP. During that time, hindi pa masyado ang mga demand natin. And we are really programming that should be online.
Okay. And of course, that was a decision of the Cory Aquino administration,
During those days, anything that Marcos is bad, so they decided not to have it operational. Sayang yun, mura ang nuclear eh.
Right.
And because of that, yung mga planta natin na dapat magkaroon ng maintenance shutdown,
because the PNPP would go online, hindi na nangyari.
Hindi nangyari yun. So, nung nagsimula mag-count ang mga planta, nagsunod-sunod.
Okay.
So we have that, what we call the unscheduled brownout. Business was so bad that you'll have to ask kung saan yung area na magmi-meeting kayo na siguradong walang brownout. So the only place na 24/7 na walang brownout are the motels, I think. So.
Okay, so how did we get to this position na 10 to 15%, sabi nyo?
I think so. I mean, maybe ERC will be in a position to...
Yeah.
But I'm pretty comfortable. The ideal is 25%. And for your info, Singapore is 100% ang kanilang reserve.
Yeah. Okay, no, but before anything else, so how did we get to that position na we have 10 to 15% or probably more?
Well, it's because the power industry was actually deregulated and private sector was allowed or was actually encouraged to be part of the system. Previously, we were vertically integrated. It was just NAPOCOR, National Power Corporation, who held both the generation and transmission side of it. So all the electric utilities had to do was to engage in a contract with NPC, and NPC, with all its basket of a generation mix, was the only entity that they had to consider.
Do we?
I think we should also take note of the system of ERC of monitoring these things, or maybe Meralco. They have things called blue, yellow, red alerts, ma'am, right? For last year, I think we had 10 yellow alerts and 1 red alert. I think red alert for anyone means something not so acceptable.
Yeah.
And,
And yellow alert is
yellow alert is you're nearing the demand, demand that could be provided by the power plant. So
Okay.
this February 26, we had 1 yellow alert. I understand. I understand that when you have a yellow alert, there's a buffer. You haven't reached that peak yet. But that's a sign, I think, to us. I don't know about the dark days if we had that system, but today that is an indicator for us that we are having low supply.
Oh, actually, I think I have to explain how the alerts work. We actually have different coded alerts according to caller. Blue alert is actually when there is a coming calamity typhoon within the next 24 hours. We also have the yellow alert and the red alert. The red alert, as the term implies, is probably the one that is most critical because it tells us that there is no available reserve that is going to answer for the regulating energy requirements for the grid. Let me just clarify that when we talk of reserve, okay, in the sense of how it is actually being operated and monitored by the grid, it is to answer for the integrity of the grid. It's not supposed to be for like if I have a power supply agreement with a particular plant and then it falls off, the grid answers for that. No, it's what you call, there's another term for that. It's backup or reserve power supply. But for the red alert, okay, it's when there's nothing that will be running for frequency regulation at the very least. So
Okay.
what the system operator does, or NGCP in this case, they will have to go on what you call an automatic load dropping. So there is a protocol by which the different electric utilities are made to automatically drop demand. So ibig sabihin, they will switch off certain feeders so that it does not actually supply electricity to certain areas.
meaning may blackout or brownout. Say
Brownout,
brownout.
yes, on certain areas,
Brownout.
depending on what the deficit is. So that's how it works.
Yeah, okay. So right now, summer, like we were saying, summer is just around the corner.
Yes. The reason why there are yellow alerts is because while you have several plants actually available, in terms of just what we call installed or dependable capacity, we have enough. But just as the congressman said earlier, they do have to go on maintenance. It's like your car. You can't have your car running in SLEX, NLEX 24/7 and not, So they do have to go on a maintenance program. And this is actually monitored by the system operator also by what we call the Grid Operating Maintenance Program. So they schedule it. But unfortunately, there are instances when it's an unplanned
Yan.
or a forced outage. So
Kakaroon ng disruption.
that's what
Nag-conk out.
that's what happens. Can
Problema
range
yun.
from boiler tube leaks, as they call it,
Yeah.
and a couple of years
And so
back.
how do we resolve situations like that?
Well, then we have to ensure that there is sufficient supply.
Okay,
So
no, but
that's
aside from a sufficient supply, don't we need more power plants?
That's it. It's about ensuring that you have enough investment in the power sector that will allow for the building and the investment into power plants that will answer for particular needs. So whether it's what you call base load, mid-merit, or peaking. So dyan na yung whether it's coal, hydro, geothermal,
Yeah.
and then for the more expensive ones, the diesel, of course, or bunker fuel. And then, of course, how we can bring in sustainable energy in the form of renewable energy or renewable power into the generation mix so that you can be assured of a balance in sustainability.
There are two areas that, on the part of Congress, as we have this Committee on Energy, we must give an assurance that the price is competitive and affordable to the consumer. And the more plant, then it's better for the consumer because you can just imagine, pag kukunti ang planta, nag-conk out, itataas nila ang presyo nila. Ang tama, consumer. Kaya, gaya ng sinabi ni Commissioner, it's an ideal scenario na marami tayong planta na ready to operate pero inirarasyon nila. Ikaw, mga ganon ka muna, operate ka, ganitong oras ka, nirarasyon nila. So, it will be viable. Hindi naman pwedeng, meron silang system na ginagawa na lahat na planta, at the end of the day, makes money. Ang problema lang natin, na gaya ng sinabi namin, that's now where concern is, it must be clean. Ayaw na namin ng mga maduduming process ng power generation. It must be cheap. It must be effective. And what we mean is effective is cost-oriented on the part of the generating plant, na mura yung planta nila at efficient pa.
Clean, cheap, effective. Sir, we're going to get back to those points in just a bit. You're watching On the Record. If you have comments, join our conversation on our social media pages at CNN Philippines. Stay with us. You're still watching On the Record. This is the first of a two-part special where we focus on the state of the power industry. How do we make sure we have enough, sustainable, and affordable power supply? Let's go back to the points you were raising, Congressman Suarez. Clean, cheap, effective.
How's that again?
Clean, cheap, effective. Sabi po
Yeah,
ninyo.
that's
Yun ang
what,
importante.
kaya ngayon, we're asking ERC to be more concerned on two issues. Ano? They must be cheap and they must be clean. And it can be achieved. And right now, we have some applicants that has taken the necessary requirement like ECC, kung ano-ano mga requirement. But as the commissioner said, it takes years. And that's what we're trying. That's why we are keen on amending the IPIRA. Because kasama sa IPIRA yung mga requirement na yan na gagawin namin friendly na pag meron kang may investor na gusto maglagay ng power plant, hindi na masyadong tedious ang requirement.
We're talking about the power supply agreements?
Yes, I think the key is how to be able to ensure that projects such as this, if I'm not mistaken, it's been called projects of national significance, are able to proceed without, of course, limiting the ability of the consumer to be able to look into these power supply agreements. And how to do it in such a manner that they are able to come online when they are needed.
Okay. Itong mga power supply agreements that you said, minsan matagal, no? Why
Yes.
do they take so long for the ERC to what? To process? And usually,
Yes, power supply
how
agreements.
long dapat
Yeah.
ba?
Power supply agreements are contracts entered into by the electric utility and the generation company. Because of this contract, then they will be able to draw power or energy to be able to supply the consumer. So it's like the electric utility getting married to a generator, but the one affected is not a party to the case, is not a party to the contract. It's the consumer. So the regulator actually ensures that we are able to address the asymmetry in this relationship or situation so that it undergoes a public hearing. It undergoes a process. So there is a public hearing. It's conducted in at least once in the area where the franchise of the electric utility is located. And then you allow interveners, oppositors, or whoever might want to become an interested party to be able to intervene. And it goes
And it's because of them
several
that
hearings.
it takes several years
Well-
or a few years.
well,
In other words, nakabinbin yan for several years and it affects, in the end, it affects power supply because there are interveners. Ganun
Well,
ba yun?
actually, we are also allowed, if it is asked for, if it's prayed for, we're also allowed to give provisional approvals or provisional authorities. Unfortunately, provisional approvals are not exactly acceptable perhaps to the lenders of these power plants. So they would like to have a final approval or a final determination on the rate that can be imposed or implemented to ensure the return and the ability, of course, of the debtor to be able to pay.
I'll make it understandable to the layman.
Yes.
Ganito.
Oo.
The basic
Yeah, all
cost,
this talk kasi,
the
no,
basic cost
it doesn't,
now
it
per
doesn't
mega
really matter to them. What's
is
important is that
about,
we get cheap, clean electricity.
Efficient.
It's about
Efficient,
$1 million, right?
Per
About two.
megawatt, it's about, it depends on the technology.
Yeah. But let's say coal-fired. You're talking about maybe $1 million. Ano? So, $1 million, katulad yan, 1,000 mega, so you're talking about 100,
100 plus.
about ₱1 billion to put up one plant. Ngayon, wala namang tayong negosyante na kaya maglabas ng ganyan pera. They have to borrow. At yung sinasabi ni Commissioner that they can give provisional, it's not bankable.
Right.
No banks will
Provisional kasi anytime pwedeng i-withdraw yan,
that's
di ba?
precisely the reason. Kaya nga, ang hina-highlight
What kind
namin
of business
dito,
is that?
That's why we have this continuing hearing in the House. That's and I think it's now high time that we should really amend some of the provision of the IPIRA. Na gagawin talaga natin dapat na investor-friendly yung pag-set up ng planta. Kasi the more plant, the better for the consumer.
Right. There's competition.
There's competition.
That will bring down the price. That will make everything more
Ngayon,
efficient.
ganito yan. Para mawala naman yung suspicion namin sa Congress na may mga ulterior motive yung iba. Kasi right now, the present operating plant is just making so much money. Kasi kukunti At gaya na sinabi ni Commissioner, pag nagkaroon ka na ng mga yellow alert, mag-i-spike agad ang presyo niyan. Ang tama niya ang consumer. Ay kung marami kang plantang laging naka-reserve, walang spike ng presyo.
I think what I have to clarify here is that the spike in prices is seen in the market because there is a market for electricity. However, power supply agreements have a fixed tariff for the lifetime of the contract. So that's where it all begins also to make sure that in the competition of these several generation companies, you are able to get the most favorable rate to the consumer.
Yeah. Can we talk about the conditions of the different power plants that we have? How many do we have in total?
Right
We
now,
have more than 160.
200.
I think we have
including
214.
yes.
No, capacity-wise, we're above 22,000. Nationwide.
22,000 megawatts nationwide,
Okay.
but dependable capacity for Luzon is about 14,000.
And the
then
rest is
in
Visayas and
Visayas,
Mindanao.
Mindanao, you have more than 2,000 for each of those.
Yeah, sorry. Kanina, I was asking how many we
Power
have.
plants.
140, 260, ano ba talaga?
We have a lot. Let me
If
see.
I have I think this one, sir, I have a number, it's 766, but it includes really small
Okay,
modular plants. But
There's
if I were just to,
766 according to the record.
according
but
to our records.
Modular plants. Ano
Yes,
yun?
modular diesel plants, small plants. They're in the small
Small.
power utility group areas, the islands.
Okay.
Those are the islands.
So the
But if I were to
excluding
just use the bigger plants and then by technology, we would see anywhere, I did not put a total, maybe about 165 more or less. The big
265.
165.
Sorry, 165.
We have about 25 or so coal plants, 39 hydro plants, because you have small hydro plants. You have 6 geothermal plants, 6 natural gas plants, 44 big capacity diesel plants. We have, well, here on my list, it's only about 31 solar plants. You have 6 wind, 14 biomass, 2 methane, and 1 battery.
But we
have
understand
battery
that these power plants, about 60% of them are already 15 years and older. And as new technologies,
15%?
15 years older. 60%.
60% of
They're-
these power plants of the
yes,
165
yes.
are 15 years and older.
Yes, and by our understanding of technology today, we have a higher efficiency, low emission power
Of
plants.
course.
Could actually
Yes.
be
Walang pinakaiba yan
better.
sa kotse,
Yeah.
di ba?
Yes.
Actually,
yes.
yung sinasabi
The
ko, mas
older, the,
kanina,
the
yeah.
harder to maintain.
Yes.
Tama?
We're facing out 15-year-old jeepneys from our streets now. Why don't we look at these things, di ba?
Actually, power plants, coal plants have a lifetime of about 25 years, 25 to 30 years. Of course, as it ages, its capacity, its ability to be able to generate up to 85 or 90% also dwindles. And,
So yung 165, what is the ideal number of power plants? Like how many more should we have, so that we can rest
I think
assured na hindi na
Yes,
tayo
I think
babalik sa
we
dark
have
ages?
to distinguish on the 3 kinds of demand that is required. So you have what you call base load, mid-merit, and peaking. So it's like when we use electricity throughout the day, it's not consistent. It's not like as if we're all here in the office 24/7, right? So when we wake up, that's when the requirements start to get up. And as we go along during the day, when it becomes hotter, then you peak into your
Yeah.
demand. And then as you see it also,
As it becomes cooler,
yes,
as the
so,
night falls. Okay.
base load is that capacity which you need 24/7. So from 12 midnight to for the 24 hours,
Okay.
it's that's what you need. So it's
Correct.
consistent. And that kind of generation capacity is addressed by your the coal plants, hydro for those that have big dams, geothermal and the like.
Yeah.
Mid-merit is those which are needed maybe anywhere from 4 to 6 hours that your power requirements spike.
Yeah, okay.
And then you have peak, which in the provinces can sometimes just be 2 hours during the evening when they're watching telenovelas. That is addressed by a different kind of plant that can just suddenly ramp up. You can turn it on right away. So those are for
Okay.
diesel
Yeah.
plants and whatnot. So
Okay. Yeah, but sorry, my question kasi, so...
is how
yes.
much. Mahirap siya sagutin on the how much because it really depends on the demand, on what you need. But
You
yeah,
look at
okay.
the cost.
Yes.
Sige.
The cost is at the end of the day, the cheapest will be the hydro.
yes,
But the construction cost is very expensive. Okay. Coal comes to be the cheapest in terms of comparison with natural
Diesel.
gas. Diesel is the most expensive, by the way. And solar, but the problem with solar is you operate maybe at the peak of about maybe
4 to 6
about
hours.
7 hours a day at the most.
A
ano.
little less.
So, what does that mean? Kung,
No,
Well,
but
kulang,
that's what we're saying here.
Yeah.
You can set up a lot of these like wind and solar as what we call the trend now. Ano?
yes,
Diyan
a
na
lot of
tayo-
people interested. Right now on Facebook, people asking about solar.
Some of these plants is saying that they at the end of the day we can have this country running by wind and solar, and we can let go of other except the hydro. Ang problema mo lang dyan, napakataas talaga ng acquisition cost. But right now, I think the prices of
Well, actually,
panel is
yeah,
going down.
It's
no?
going
So,
down. I think
Okay.
what the
Ma'am, sandali
challenge-
lang.
sige.
Can you hold that thought? I think, and then we'll continue the sentence. After this break, we need to take a short break. This is On the Record here on CNN Philippines. Be right back. Welcome back. This is On the Record. Ma'am, Josefina Magpala-Asirit, Energy Regulatory Commission. You were saying, I think...
Yes, I think I forgot what I was supposed to say.
Ala.
We were actually talking about, if I'm not mistaken, the cost of
Yes.
these plants. The challenge actually on renewable energy is their ability to be able to sustain. Kasi kunwari, if you're talking about solar, you have to make sure that it's available. And how do you make it available if solar power is only good for the day? And if like there's a cloud, then it also affects the ability. So how
Okay.
to answer that? You need battery energy storage systems.
but very expensive.
Still very
Okay.
expensive, but
Wind,
hopefully
hydro.
Wind, yes, wind usually you have wind during the early morning hours or in the evening when you don't need that much energy because people will be asleep or whatnot. But still, we do believe in the ability of renewable energy to be
Yeah.
able to supply, and that's a good thing. It's a good thing.
Okay, Louis, you're very quiet. What kind of power plants do you want?
Well, of course, the ideal would be the renewables, or solar,
Renewables.
geothermal.
Solar,
But
geothermal.
we understand that this takes a lot of investment and it takes time to develop all these things.
Yeah.
But right
Nuclear.
now, nuclear.
What,
Personally, I have some issues with nuclear energy because there are alternatives.
In one
which-
sentence, what is that issue with
Well,
nuclear?
it puts a lot of things in danger for us. We are a very earthquake-prone place, for instance. You see what happened in Japan with their nuclear plants. That had
But there are many
accidents.
other countries that use nuclear.
Certainly,
Yeah.
but the point is there are alternatives. You have solar for this country. You have water sources, hydrothermal.
But
So-
we just talked about solar
right,
plants. no?
right. So I think let's go more into that. And right now in the ERC, there are pending power plant agreements that they
Power
haven't
supply
worked
agreements,
out
yeah.
yet.
They have a lot of applicants.
As Ma'am said,
How
it
many?
takes 2 years.
How many are they?
Oh,
10,
a lot,
20, 30,
No,
40?
we have in the hundreds that
Hundreds,
are actually...
okay.
7 of them are
cases,
with Morocco, I think. So
Yeah, nakabinbin for 2 years?
well,
ganon?
no, some are new. It's a continuous application
Okay,
process.
and
that
some can
we
take like
process.
2 years just
Yes,
to
yes.
process because
Like,
we
for
have all these
example,
interveners, oppositors. Like,
Well, it depends on how active a consumer group might be in their interest in a power supply agreement.
Yeah, no, just going to that area, no, it's parochial on my side because the plant is in my province, Quezon. But what and the commissioner knows this, that the latest technology now in power generation is what we call this supercritical. Meaning, yung fear mo ng environmental hazard because it's coal-fired, mawawala na yon. And at the end of the day, they're cost-effective and it will be beneficial to the consumer because the price will be very low. And that's what we're saying. They had been on the parking area for the last 2 years. Wala pang notice to proceed. Now, I'm not saying that there's something wrong in the system, but as I've said, they structure themselves, as like the commissioner is saying, we have to subject them to public hearing. One oppositor, it will take you maybe 6 months.
6 months?
Yeah, maybe even more.
So if anyone wants to delay the granting of a
Purposely,
power
yes,
supply
they
agreement for whatever reason, no, whether legitimate or not, all they need to do is make an opposition and it can pwedeng mabinbin for 6 months.
Well, I think what we have to ensure is that there is due process being observed. So certainly, if there are interveners or oppositors, then they must be heard. If there's just one, then that can be a bit more manageable. But if you
Yeah.
have several,
Plenty.
like maybe 5, 10,
Yeah.
who
Well, you said
all
there are
have the ability to cross-examine and to present also their own evidence,
Yeah.
then it can certainly take time.
But do we all agree, and all the players in this industry agree, that the most important is that we need to supply electricity, power for the consumers that is clean, cheap, and effective. So therefore, everything that is done should be
Along
working toward that
direction.
goal, di ba?
But let me also put,
Yes.
put on record that in terms of prices for electricity, in the last 7 years, generation cost has been going down a lot. Almost half of our charges now are artificial charges. These are taxes of corporate other fees that are not related to the actual cost of providing electricity or producing them. So this must be looked into. I mean, we're actually supporting that
Yeah.
the ERC
Yeah.
approved most of this already, so that we can have more power
Okay.
plants. But
Oo.
you know.
Yeah. You know also, we're supposed to wrap up. So, pero mahal pa rin ang kuryente natin, right? Okay,
Because
dapat.
it's not
The highest.
subsidized.
One of the
We are
highest
not
in the-
subsidized.
Not
Yeah.
because of generation cost. And tama si Congressman, maybe we should have more power plants. But again, how do we go have that now when we have
Okay.
a very long process?
Okay, I'm sorry, we ran out of time, but we're going to have a part 2 of this discussion next Thursday. So thank you to our guests tonight, Congressman Danilo Suarez, ERC Commissioner, Josefina Magpale-Asirit, and Louis Montemar. Salamat. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching On the Record. I'm Pia Ontiveros.